All right, first question, solve. X squared equals 121. So there's a couple ways to think about this question. The first way to think about it is that when I'm solving equations, I always use inverse operations, right? So if you remember, like if I have this, I say, oh, what's happening to x? 3 is being added, so I do the opposite, I subtract, right? And I do it on both sides. These are called inverse operations. So what's the inverse operation of squared? I square root on both sides. I say, oh, I want to get rid of the squared, so I'm going to square root. And what's the square root of 121? Well, the square root of 121 means what number times itself equals 121. And that number is 11 times 11 is 121, but also negative 11 times negative 11 is also 121. Why? Because a negative times negative is a positive. So you could think about it in terms of inverse operations. You could also just say, oh, this means some mystery number times itself equals 121. What could that mystery number be? Well, it could be 11. 11 times 11 is 121, or it could be negative 11. Negative 11 times negative 11 is also 121. And then we just get in the habit of writing it like this. Smaller number first, which is the negative, then the larger. Okay, so that's their first example. Here is another problem. Now remember, we're interleaving here, so this is going to be a different topic, and we're going to force our brains to switch between topics, and it's actually going to really work for our learning. Okay, so next thing, we're going to simplify the square root of 54. How do we do this? Well, we look at 54 and we say, oh, unlike the square root of 121, which is a whole number, right? 11 times 11 is 121. There's no number that multiplies to 54. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify. I need two numbers that multiply to 54. 9 and 6 multiply to 54. Okay. Now, let's say I was stuck and I didn't think of 9 and 6. I could say, oh, that's even. And I could say, okay, I'm going to divide it by 2. And then I could just do 54 divided by 2. We get 27 and so on. Okay. Now, in this case, I notice right away that 9 is a perfect square. Remember, it's that 3 times 3. Okay. And then 6 is 3 times 2. And I'm going to circle all my primes. And notice that I can't factor any of these anymore. So now I'm going to say the square root of 54 is the same as the square root of 3 times 3 times 3 times 2. And you can even check, right? 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 2 is 54. Now, what I can do is I can simplify this. Why? Because when I have doubles, these are singles, this is a double, the doubles simplify. Okay, the singles do not. So look, the singles are going to go in their own house, and the doubles go in their own house. Why? Because this simplifies. This is 3 times 3 is 9. And what's the square root of 9? The square root of 9 is 3, right? We can also view this like in the first problem. We can view this as the same as, right? This is 3 times 3, that's 3 squared. So this is 3 squared and square rooted. That's inverse. So what I'm left with is just the 3. The square and square roots are inverse operations and they undo each other. So this simplifies. And then in here, this doesn't simplify, right? Because there's no double that makes this something squared and square rooted. So I can just leave this as 3 times 2, which is 6. Okay, so those are two topics that we learned so far. And last example problem, give yourself some space. We're going to simplify x squared y to the third to the power of 2. Okay. For this kind of problem, I don't like memorizing all the rules. There's like a lot of rules it feels like that I would need to memorize if I was going to try to memorize. So I like to just kind of always fall back on just understanding what this means, right? This means 6 times x times x times y times y times y. And then this squared means that everything inside the parentheses is happening again, right? That this is being multiplied by itself. So I'm just going to write it out. Okay, so then I'm going to just multiply through. So I'm going to do the numbers first. 6 times 6 is 36. X times x times x times x, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. Okay, which makes sense. Look, it's 2 x's 2 times. Okay, and then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 y's. Right? It was 3 y's 2 times. So that makes sense that that's 6. And there's my answer.